Hello children, my name is Suresh. Today I am going to discuss something about the first chapter in CBSE books, biology, first chapter, that is fundamental unit of life. It is also called as the basic unit of life. Why it is called as the basic unit of life or fundamental unit of life? Because every living organism, whether it is a tiny organism or a mega organism, a big organism like an elephant or a human being or a rat or an ant or an amoeba or a bacteria, every living organism is made up of cells. See, as a living organism, certain activities are being performed. What do you mean by activities performed? To show that something is living, there are some characteristics or activities which show that a thing is living. For example, taking food. Taking food we call as nutrition. Why any organism needs food? To get energy. From the food that it takes, it produces energy to do all the activities during its lifetime. Right? And after taking food, some of it is thrown out as a waste, means which the body doesn't require, its body doesn't require, whether it's a plant, whether it's an animal, whether it's a microorganism, anything. So throwing out of that waste is called as excretion. Right? Now, every living organism respires. Respiration means what? Producing energy from the food it takes. Most importantly, every living organism increases in size. It increases in height or increases in the width, it increases in weight. Everything is what we call as growth. Right? Once it takes the food, it has to be broken down into simpler forms so that the body absorbs it, accepts it, which we call as digestion. Like this, there are so many activities performed by a living organism. All these activities are performed by what we call as the cell. Cell forms the basic unit, fundamental unit, or we also call it as the functional unit. We also call it as structural unit. We call it as functional unit, we call it as structural unit. Why? Because it does a function. All these functions are done by the cell. See, there are some organisms which are made up of a single cell. Means a single cell performs all these activities. It takes the food, throws out the waste, it moves from one place to another, it digests the food, it throws out the waste, it produces everything is done by a single cell. Only one cell performs all these activities, processes what we call. So such organisms we call as unicellular organisms. We call them as unicellular organisms. A single cell performs all these activities. Example, a bacterial cell, or a yeast, or a chlamydomonas. All these are, or you can give the example of amoeba. All these organisms are performing the activities by a single cell. Alright? Best example, you can remember these. You remember these. Bacteria we already know. Yeast is used in so many confectionery, bakery items. Amoeba, a unicellular organism, you know that. Right? amoeba, chlamydomonas, or plasmodium, or you can call it as euglena. So many are there which are made up of only one cell. All these cells perform the functions. A single cell performs all the functions. That's why we call them as unicellular organisms. There are some organisms which are made up of many cells. We call them as multicellular organisms. We call them as multicellular organisms. Means made up of many cells. Made up of many cells. Some may be made up of a few hundred cells or few thousand cells, and some organisms may be made up of millions and billions of cells. Like our own self, or you can say human beings. We are multicellular. Even an insect like a butterfly is multicellular. Or a mouse. All these are multicellular. They are made up of more cells, right? Whether it is unicellular or whether it is multicellular, all these activities or processes are performed by each and every living organism. That's why they are called living organisms. That's why we are called living organisms. That shows that something is living. What shows that something is living? These activities, these processes. Whether they are performed by a single cell or whether they are performed by many cells. This cell is called as a functional unit, structural unit, because depending on the function, depending on the activity that it does, it has a different structure. Depending upon the function, depending upon the work that a cell does, it has a different structure. Like for example, in our own body, we have different cells. What type of cells we have? We have cells like the blood cells, we have blood cells like RBC, red blood cells, we have egg cell, we have a nerve cell, we have cells of skin cells, right? Like that, we have cells in the lungs, we have cells in the heart, etc. All these cells are different. All the cells are different. Nerve cell is long cell, which you call as a neuron. Skin cells are called epithelials, they are different. RBC is having a biconcave cell, shape structure, that is different. Egg cell is round. Lung cells have tiny cells called alveoli, they are different. Heart is made up of muscle cells, they are different. Is it not? See, different types of cells are there. Why they have different structure, different shape? Because they have different function. They have different function. That is why, depending on the function, they have different structure. That's why cell is defined as not simply fundamental unit of life or not only basic unit of life, it is called as the structural and functional unit of living organisms. It is defined as the structural and functional unit of living organisms. Cell is more clearly, elaborately defined as structural and functional unit of living organisms. Structural and functional unit of living organisms, right? This cell was first found out or first seen by a scientist called as Robert Hooke. The cell was first observed by a scientist called as Robert Hooke in the year 1665 when he was observing a slice of bottle cork. When he was observing a slice of bottle cork. In those days, this aluminium, metal caps were not there, rubber was not there. They were using wooden cork for bottles and all. He was observing a small piece, a small section of that cork under a simple microscope. And he found something like rooms. Means what? Where the monks stay, monastery. Where the monks stay, priests stay. He recorded those. It looked like small rooms where the monks stay in a monastery. So he called them as the cells. Means according to him, cells means small rooms. According to him, cells referred to small rooms where the monks lived. Then later, another person, Anthony van Leeuwenhoek, he modified the microscope and he found some living organisms in a pond water. He observed living organisms in a drop of pond water and he called these living organisms as animalcules. He called the living organisms in the drop of pond water as animalcules. The modified microscope that we see today is consisting of two lenses. This is called a compound microscope. It is called as the compound microscope. What this compound microscope shows? It magnifies, it enlarges the objects. There are two lenses. One lens is here, which is called as the objective lens. And another one is called as eyepiece. One is called as eyepiece. And another one is called as what you call the eyepiece and the objective lens. Means what? This lens is for viewing. The first lens is for eyepiece, means viewing. That's why it's called eyepiece. And the other one called as the objective is a higher magnification. It can magnify hundreds of times, maximum up to 2000 times, not more than that. A compound microscope can give a magnification maximum up to 2000 times. So this is one lens, this is another lens. This lens is used to view those slides, view the object, view the cells. And this lens is focused on the slide. This is the slide here, on which we keep the cells. Slides are made using different sections. We call histograms, sections of tissues, sections of cells, small organisms, anything you can see under the microscope. And you can even see a strand of hair, a small single strand of hair you can see. Or you can take your cheek cells, cells within the mouth, and put a slide, put a drop of water, cover it with a cover slip and observe it under the cell. Under this microscope you can see the cells, different type of cells like this. These are the cells that we observe in an onion peel. Onion peel means what? Onion. Right? Take a small thin section of the onion, put it on a slide, put a drop of water, cover it with a cover slip and keep it on the stage. This is the stage. This is called the stage or the platform. You keep the slide here and focus it with a low power. There are two lenses here, objectives. One is called low power and another is called high power. You first see it under the low power, then you can see under the high power. We can use some stains also to make the slides clearer. Okay. Now, when you observe that, you will find cells like this. This is like what we call onion peel. Right? This is the example of what? It is the example of a plant cell. Like that, you can take the cells from your cheek, means from the mouth, inner layer of the mouth, thin layer, put a small piece on a slide, put a drop of water, cover it with a cover slip, and again observe it here. You will see different type of cells. That will be the example of your animal cell. Cheek cell is an example of animal cell. Right? Now, like this, two scientists, one is a botanist called as Matthias Schleiden of Germany. Matthias Schleiden of Germany, who was a botanist. Botanist who means who studies the plant, who studies the plants. It's called a botanist. And a scientist called Theodor Swan, who was a geologist. Who is a geologist? One who studies the animals. Study of animals is called zoology. Study of plants is called botany. So both belonged to Germany. One a botanist in 1838 and another a geologist in 1839 made some declaration, made some announcements. This person, Schleiden, said all the plants are made up of cells. All the plants are made up of cells. Similarly, 1 year later, Theodor Swan made an announcement that all the animals are made up of cells. All the plants are made up of cells. All the animals are made up of cells. Together, they form what we call as a cell theory. What is called as a cell theory. Later, another person called Rudolf Virchow added one more statement to that theory. So these three, Matthias Schleiden, Theodor Swan and Rudolf Virchow, have formed a theory which is called cell theory. What does the cell theory say? It says, first postulate, all plants and animals are made up of cells. All the plants and animals are made up of cells. First point. Second point. First point. All plants and animals are made up of cells. Second point, cell is the functional unit of living organisms. Cell is the functional unit of living organisms. These were stated by these two scientists, Schleiden and Swan. Later, Virchow added that all cells arise from pre-existing cells. Third postulate of cell theory is all cells arise from pre-existing cells. Means what? Cells do not come spontaneously. They are not born spontaneously. Something from nowhere, they don't come here. They are formed or produced by the living cells only. Only living cells can give rise to new cells. That is the meaning of all cells arise from pre-existing cells. All plants and animals are made up of cells. Cell is a functional unit of living organisms, and all cells arise from pre-existing cells. These are the three postulates of cell theory formulated by these scientists. Right? Now, after the invention of another important instrument what is called as an electron microscope. We could understand, we could study more detailed composition or parts of the cell, how they are made up of, what do they do, because an electron microscope, this is a compound microscope, an electron microscope gives a higher magnification. An electron microscope gives a higher magnification, which can give up to or even more. You can get a magnification even more than that. Okay, one can be observing a cell under compound microscope, and here hundreds of times the size what we see in a compound microscope we can see in an electron microscope. That's why we came to know about what is the first we saw only the cell, but what is there inside is because there are minute structures which are present inside the cell. Those are made up of what? Was able to study because of the electron microscope. The discovery of electron microscope has enabled the study of even finer things, very smallest, even very tiniest things which are present in the cell, which are not seen, which cannot be seen with the naked eye, or which cannot be seen even with a compound microscope. Right? Even higher than this, even many times higher than this, we can see the size in an electron microscope. Right? There are certain things that we need to know here. Why the cell, or what part of the cell performs the activities, different activities. The cell has different parts which we call components. Cell has different components which we call as cell organelles. There are so many living parts. They are all living structures. They are all living structures. And all these living structures perform different function. Means they have specific function. They have specific function. And what are those cell organelles? What is the function done by all these cell organelles? What part of the cell controls the functions of all these cell organelles? I will explain in my next video. Right? What is a cell organelle? What is its function? How many cell organelles can be there in any cell, whether it is a plant cell or an animal cell? And which part of the cell controls all the activities of these organelles? I will tell you in my next video. Till then, keep reading, and if you have any queries or any clarifications, you can ask me. Alright? You can write in the comments. I will try to answer you. Right? Thank you.